Hello, welcome in episode 3 of No Face, No Case, where we don't judge the players by the names, but by the stats they produce. My name's Shanholtz, and in last episode we went over the running backs, so just moving right along down the list, we're doing the wide receivers. Now for these 3 wide receivers, they are basically going back to back to back in all drafts, all mock drafts I'm seeing right now online. And everyone has them basically 1, 2, 3. You could interchange these guys any way you please. But I kind of wanted to dive further into their stats and see if that's really the case, or is there a little bit more of a discrepancy between one compared to the other two? So breaking these guys down again, for the 3, we have contestant 1 in red, contestant 2 is blue, and contestant 3 is yellow, just to keep everything in order. We got their player profiles, we got their career fantasy finishes, their career stats, and then their last season's outlook. So we have 4 segments for you guys. And for these 3, since they're so close together, I really tried to break down the career stats and the season outlook for you. So hopefully you enjoy this part. And maybe we'll see if one's better than the other 2. So with that being said, let's just dive right into it. So for the player's profile, this is just their age, height, weight, what they were in high school and college, and if they have any Pro Bowls. So this is just kind of an overview of the players without giving you their names. For the first one, it might give it away just because of the height and weight. But contestant 1 here is age 24, 6 foot tall, 170, was a 5-star high school recruit, yes to the Power 5 conference, and 0 Pro Bowl selections. So a little taller of a wide receiver, but not as big. And continuing with contestant 2, we're starting to see a little bit of a trend. Age 24, height 5'10", weight 182, was a 4-star high school recruit, yes to the Power 5 conference, and 0 Pro Bowl selections. So the first 2 contestants are 24 years old with 0 Pro Bowl selections. So they're very young. So dynasty-wise, you're definitely going to want to look into these players. All 3 of them are very young. So you're going to want to look into these 3 players. So if you're in a dynasty league and you're drafting this summer or this upcoming season, please don't hesitate to look at these 3. I think they're all 3 very good picks. It's just I wanted to see if one's better than the other 2. That's basically why we're doing this, to see who's better and who's not and who produces. And contestant 3 is good to keep the trend going with age and Pro Bowl selections. 24 years old. The one thing I like about this player compared to the other 2 is his height and weight. I love bigger players when it comes to football. I think they produce a little bit better just because of their body. Not everyone could be 6'4" and 219 pounds. So that just gives this guy a little bit of an advantage as far as his physicals. But his high school recruit, he was a 4-star, yes to the Power 5 conference, and 0 Pro Bowl selections. So as far as the player's profile go, I like contestant 3's the most, simply due to his size and weight. That is the only thing I see that strikes me and has any interest for me to pick him over the other 2. Moving right along, we're going to the career fantasy finishes. This is just where they placed each year. And I have the standard in PPR, so you don't have to worry about that. And I'll try to break it down the best I can. So going to contestant 1 in red, a total of 2 seasons. His rookie year finished standard wide receiver 30 and PPR wide receiver 29. And then in 2022, finished standard 10 and PPR 9. So what this shows me is there is a huge leap between his rookie and sophomore year. Now, do we know if that indicates a breakout season? You don't know. Is this just a one-and-done fluke season? You don't know. Like I said in the beginning, you're probably going to want to target these 3. So chances are this is going to be a breakout. But just based off the stats with no other evidence or like sources of information, just looking at the stats, you can definitely tell he was much better his sophomore year than he was his rookie season. And it looks like he gets it done in everything, catches, yards, and touchdowns, because his standard and PPR jumped just about the same. Exactly the same, I believe, 20 spaces each. So the catches went up as well as the yards and touchdowns. So that's very good. That's a very good sign in a wide receiver. You like everything across the board to jump up, not just 1 or 2 things. Now, going into contestant 2 here in blue, also played 2 seasons, but he had a lot better rookie finish than the contestant 1. And he also finished a little bit better in his sophomore season as well. But to break down this guy's stats a little bit, what I see here, and just in my mind, it shows that this guy does not catch as many targets compared to his yards per catch and touchdowns. You can see that by the jump in standard compared to the jump in PPR. The 5-space jump in PPR compared to a 14-space jump in standard shows me that his catches don't go up as much from season to season, but his yards and touchdowns do. The only reason I know that is because, if you guys know, PPR is points per reception. So for every catch, you get an extra point. So that's why some of these announcers say they're a PPR monster or a PPR machine. Amon-Ra St. Brown is an example that comes to my mind. This guy's going to catch 100, 110, 100, like over 100 catches, and that just jumps you up so much in PPR. So that's why PPR is slightly different than standard. So the jump up from standard compared to the PPR shows me that the catches didn't increase as much as the yards and touchdowns. So when we get to this guy, I'm assuming his yards per catch is going to be much higher than the other two, and his 20 plus yard catches is going to be higher as well, because you have to have breakout catches if you're going to have this jump from standard compared to PPR be so dramatically different. And coming into contestant 3, yes, they're all 24 years old, but this guy has an extra season under his belt, so you can take that however you want. His rookie season, this guy has the least amount of jump. This guy has not broke the top 15 in either category yet, so that is kind of disappointing, especially when he's being compared to the other two that both broke the top 10 in standard and PPR last year. But just diving in, standard and PPR 28 is rookie season, standard 17 and PPR 24 is sophomore, and then last year he got standard 17 and PPR 18. So, I mean, he consistently improves every year, so maybe he'll jump up again next year. You never know, just based off the stats. But comparing this guy with the last two, this is probably my least favorite career fantasy finishes, just because he hasn't even broke the top 15 yet, and that's a little discouraging, especially when he's being drafted so close to the other two players. Now, that does bring us into our career stats, and I did this one a little differently than the last two. Since these guys are so close together, they're literally getting drafted one right after the other. I wanted to break down the stats as much as I could for you guys, so hopefully you enjoy that. But I have their career stats to the left compared to each player, so they're either going to be first, second, or third, and their career averages. So I not only broke down the career stats as of total volume, but as an average as well. So with that being said, contestant 1 plays every single game that he's had in his career. Big green flag, big green check. You love to see that. You love when your players are on the field getting you points instead of setting. For his career stats, 240 targets, 159 catches, over 1,000 yards a season average. Very good. That's another green check. I love 1,000-yard receivers. 12 touchdowns, 34 20-plus yard catches, and 5 40-plus yard catches. So just to break that down for you as far as their career stats, this is obviously going to be the worst stats, career total volume out of the three. But that's not to mention that contestant 3 in yellow has another season under their belt compared to the first two. So take the career volumes with a grain of salt. But coming to the averages over here, this is going to be more accurate and broken down. And it doesn't really impress me as well compared to the other three. He's tied second in targets and catches, finishes second in yards per catch, third in yards per game, third in touchdowns, first in 20-plus yard catches. So that's his only upside compared to the other two. And then third in 40-plus yard catches. So this guy, career averages-wise, does not get it done for me, especially compared to the other two. So with that being said, I'm a little hesitant on contestant in red right now, just based on his career averages compared to the other two, which are coming up. Now, contestant 2 here in blue is the opposite. I think he has the best career averages out of the three, with over 50% of the stats being in first place. You love to see that. But just to break down his stats, he basically plays every game. He missed 1 in 2 seasons, so you're not going to scuff at that. That's you like that. You want that on your team. The more games they play, the more points they get. Simple as that. 257 targets, 179 catches, 2,300 yards, 14 touchdowns, 29 20-plus yard catches, and 8 40-plus yard catches. So this guy is the most 40-yard catches total career volume. So he beats contestant 3 with an extra season. So that's just something to look at. And then basically second in everything else. But the averages is where I want to draw your attention to. First in targets, first in catches, first in yards per game, and first in 40-plus yard catches. The stats basically told this earlier when you looked at their career finishes. Like I said, the standard jump is going to show more boom plays. So the 40-plus yard catches didn't really catch you by surprise, hopefully, if you know how to look at PPR and standard formatting. And yards per game shouldn't have thrown you off either. The more yards they get, the better they are at standard compared to PPR with the catches. But this guy kind of also has the most catches and targets as well. So, I mean, the stats don't tell you everything, but it's nice to look at them on paper just to get a feel for how they finish. And then you got contestant 3. Remember, he had an extra season under his belt, so that's why his career stats are basically first in everything. So that's why I said that's not as prevalent as the averages. But to break down his stats, he plays basically 15 games a season. So this guy misses 1 or 2. So take that into account when you're drafting all 3 of these back to back to back. 327 targets, 215 catches, 3,028 yards. So 1,000 yards a season, very good. Green check. 19 touchdowns, 45 20-plus yarders, and 7 40-plus yarders. So only 1 40-plus yard catch less than contestant 2. But he's also had a full season to catch up compared to him. So that's why contestant blue is such a yards per catch. Like, he gets the yards in the air or yak or however he does it. He gets more yards per catch than the other guys. But that doesn't show in the stats, which is kind of confusing. But the stats are the stats. You can't really make them up. So tied second in targets and catches. First in yards per catch, but second in yards per game. First in touchdown percentage. Second in 20-plus yard catches, and second in 40-plus yard catches. So this guy's second in everything. So yellow's basically seconds across the board. Blue was basically 50% over, was first, and then contestant 1, which was red, is third. So if you're looking at the career finishes, the averages, I would go contestant blue first, contestant yellow second, and contestant red third. But as you can tell, the contestant 1 has a much better fantasy finish than contestant 3. So it's kind of all over the place with these 3 guys. I understand why they're going back to back to back because the stats are all over the place with these guys. So it's hard to really tell. It's almost a preference pick for me at this point. Now this is where it's really going to get interesting. This is their last year's finishes. So this is where you can kind of see, is it a breakout season? Was it just a fluke season? How's it going to break down? How's it going to shake up? So with that being said, contestant 1 last year finished standard wide receiver 10, PPR wide receiver 9, played a full season, was wide receiver 13 in targets, wide receiver 9 in catches, with a 70% catch clip. Very good. I like that. Wide receiver 8 in yards. So the catches and yards were there, top 10. Tied for wide receiver 12 in touchdowns, wide receiver 12 and 20-plus yarders, and tied wide receiver 10 for 40-plus yarders. So the one thing I really like about this guy's his finish last year, is that none of these stats are outside the wide receiver 15. That is very, very good. That shows me that he got it done on every single level. He commanded the targets, He has the catches. He has the yards behind him. The touchdowns were there. The big plays were there. I don't think this is a fluke. If it was a fluke, you would kind of see like the yards or the touchdowns be like wide receiver 1 or 2, and then the rest would be lower. This guy's all across the board, all within wide receiver 15, so I love that. I think this guy's going to continue this trend. He might not break the top 10, but he's definitely going to be better than his rookie finish, which was standard 30 and PPR 29, I believe. So going into contestant 2, finished standard wide receiver 7, PPR wide receiver 8 within 17 games. So he played a full season as well. And this is kind of what I was talking about with the last wide receiver. As far as the stats, wide receiver 22 in targets, wide receiver 23 tie and catches. But his yards was wide receiver 7. His touchdowns is wide receiver 8 tie. His 20-plus yard catches was wide receiver 5. And his 40-plus yard catches was wide receiver 3 tie. So to break this down, if I'm going to break it down for you, I don't think this guy's going to have the same season as he did this year. Why do I think that? He was outside the top 20 in targets and catches, and he was within the top 10 in the rest. That shows me that his yards per catch and everything was skyrocketed, very inflated numbers. These are going to be very hard to keep up. 54.7% of his catches went for 20-plus yarders. That is going to be unsustainable. You're not going to be 8% of his, basically 1 in 10 catches went for 40-plus yards last year. That shows me that's unattainable. You're not going to catch 40-plus yarders at a 10% clip every single season. That's just not going to happen. This guy definitely had a breakout season. Is he going to be good? Yes, he's going to be a wide receiver 2 worst. I don't think he's going to fall that much, but he's not. For me personally, I don't think he's fallen within a wide receiver 10 this year, just because he doesn't demand as many targets and catches as wide receiver 1. I like the more consistent base that wide receiver 1 had than this one, because the targets and catches aren't there. He just super inflated. He had 18.1 yards per catch last year. I mean, these stats are not going to be sustainable. Now, if he gets more catches or more targets and catches, then yeah, that's a whole nother story. But if he keeps the same type of volume, the stats just aren't going to be the same. If they are, this guy's an anomaly, and he's going to be one of the best wide receivers to ever play, especially if he catches over 50% of his passes over 20-plus yards. I mean, that's insane. I don't think these stats are going to continue. So with that being said, contestant 3 played all 17 games last year as well, so everyone played a full season. You love to see it. Wide receiver 26 in targets, wide receiver 23 tie in catches, 68% clip, very good catch rate. 1,000 yards last year, wide receiver 17, tied wide receiver 12 in touchdowns, wide receiver 18 and 20-plus yarders, and tied wide receiver 16 for 40-plus yarders. So how are you going to break this down, Shanholtz? I think he's going to float right around here next year. He's going to float. The targets were there. I know this player, so I know that these stats aren't totally going to be accurate as well as what his season did last year. You'll find that out in the next slide whenever I reveal who they are. But he didn't play. He played 17 games on paper, but I think 1 or 2 of them he played like 1 or 2 snaps and then just didn't play the rest of the game. And then the yards per catch, 14's right around where you want to float. 4% of his catches were touchdowns. That's right around where you want to float. 32% of his catches were 20-plus yarders. I mean, these are all league averages almost. 4.4 catches a game. He gets about 6.5 targets per game. I mean, he's just going to be a consistent receiver for you. I think this guy has possibly the highest floor out of the 3. Just the other 2 ceilings is just so much higher than this guy. It's hard to, if you're going off stats and you're a floor guy, it's hard to not pick this guy just because he's going to float anywhere from wide receiver 16, 17 to wide receiver 20, 21. And then the other guys, yes, they both broke the top 10. I definitely like contestant 1's averages and stuff. They're all within the top 15 receivers. So I think if he takes into next year, he's just going to finish within the top 15 again. And then contestant 2, his volume just isn't there for me. If he gets that up, he will stay within the top 12, top 14. But if he stays at the same volume he was last year, which I believe he will, the stats aren't going to be there. They're just too inflated to keep sustainability. They're not going to. That's unsustainable. 54% of your catches are 20-plus yards. That's just a great season. I don't think that's going to happen again. So with that being said, here are the players. Devontae Smith was red, Jalen Waddle was blue, and T. Higgins was yellow. So these guys go 10, 12, and 13. I believe Garrett Wilson was ADP wide receiver 11 on the Fantasy Pros website whenever I looked. But they basically go 1, 2, and 3 because Wilson's ceiling, everyone's going crazy with Aaron Rodgers. So these guys go 1, 2, and 3 back to back to back. But to break them down, Devontae Smith, I mean, they're all wide receiver 2s. That's why they're kind of mixed together. They're the best of the best at wide receiver 2s. So if you're going to ask me who I'm going to pick out of the 3, I'm going to have to go Devontae Smith just because the sustainability of Jalen Hurts is there. All the stats seem to be pointing in the great direction. That offense is phenomenal. With Jalen Waddle, yes, his career finishes have been better. Yes, his stats are higher. But you just don't know what's happening in Miami right now with Tua. You just don't know how many games Tua is going to give you. And for T. Higgins, he just doesn't – his ceiling's not high enough for me to take over Devontae Smith. So I like Devontae Smith, especially with the ADP price, 2 wide receivers behind. That's not a huge jump, but that'll give you a couple picks ahead. You could even probably sneak him around later if you're at the turn. So, I mean, take that with what you will. I gave you the stats and I gave you everything. Hopefully you can make the best decision for yourself. And with that being said, my name is Shanholtz, and this is the third episode of No Face, No Case, where we don't judge the players by the names, but by the stats they produce. The next episode will definitely be tight ends. We're just going in order, so stick around for that. That's probably going to be the most interesting, just because of the spread of tight ends is so hard. I'm going to try to pick lower end tight ends for you guys, just so you kind of have like a backup plan if Travis Kelce goes 1-4, 1-5. It's really hard to pick after that. So come around for that. And hopefully you enjoy what I have for you today, and see you next episode.